Chapter 10 of The Moral Pirates. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. The Moral Pirates by Livingston Alden. Going Through the Lock. The policeman did not return, and the boys slept until an hour after sunrise. They then rowed down the river to the steamboat landing, where they left their boat in charge of a boatman, and went to a hotel for breakfast. The waiters were rather astonished at the tremendous appetites displayed by the four sunburnt boys, and there is no doubt that the landlord lost money that morning. After breakfast, Harry went to the express office, where he found a large waterproof India rubber bag, which the department had sent in answer to his letter. At the post office were letters from home for all the boys, and a postal order for $10 from Uncle John for the use of the expedition. Harry had no idea that this money would be needed, but it subsequently proved to be very useful. Quite a quantity of stores were bought at Albany, for the voyage up the Hudson had lasted longer than anyone had supposed it would, and the provisions were getting low. No unnecessary time was spent in buying these stores, for a fair wind was blowing, and all the boys were anxious to take advantage of it. By 10 o'clock they were again afloat, and soon after noon they reached Troy and entered the canal. The canal basin was crowded with canal boats, and to avoid accidents the White Wing's mast was taken down, and the oars were got out. Harry knew that, in order to pass through the locks, it would be necessary to pay toll, and to procure an order from the canal authorities, directing the lockmen to permit the White Wing to pass. The canal boatman, of whom he made inquiries, told him where to find the office, which was some little distance up the canal. When the office was reached, an officer came and inspected the boat, asked a great many questions about the cruise up the Hudson, and seemed to be very much interested in the expedition. He told the boys that the water was low in the Champlain Canal, and that the lockmen might not be willing to open the locks for so small a boat, but that they could avoid all dispute by entering the locks at the same time with some one of the many canal boats that were on their way north. He charged the White Wing the enormous sum of 25 cents for tolls, and gave Harry an important-looking order, by which the lockmen were directed to allow the skiff White Wing, Captain Harry Wilson, to pass through all the locks on the canal. Thanking the pleasant officer, the boys pushed off. After they had passed the place where the Champlain Canal branches off from the Erie Canal, they were no longer troubled by a crowd of canal boats, and were able to set the sail again. Unluckily, the mast was just a little too high to pass under the bridges, and at the first bridge which they met, they narrowly escaped a capsize, Jim succeeding in getting the mast down only just in time to save it from striking the bridge. They had hardly set sail again when another bridge came in sight, and they could see just beyond it a third bridge. It would never do to stop at every bridge and unship the mast, so Harry went on shore, borrowed a saw from a cooper's shop, and sawed 6 inches off the top of the mast, after which the bridges gave them no more trouble. The boys were very much interested in passing the first lock. They slipped into the lock behind a big canal boat, which left just room enough between its rudder and the gate for the White Wing. When the lockman shut the gate behind the boat, and opened the sluices in the upper gate, the water rose slowly and steadily. The sides of the lock were so steep and black that the boys felt very much as if they were at the bottom of a well, but it was not many minutes before the water had risen so high that the upper gates were open, and the big canal boat and its little follower were released. Passing through a lock in a small boat, and in company with a canal boat, is not a perfectly safe thing to do, for if the ropes which fasten the canal boat should break, which they sometimes do, the water rushing in through the sluices would force the canal boat against the lower gate and crush the small boat like an eggshell. It is, therefore, best always to pass through a lock alone, or in company with other small boats. The danger, however, is in reality very slight, and very few accidents occur in canal locks. The wind died away before sunset, and the boys, having had only a light lunch, which they ate on the boat, were glad to go ashore for supper. They bought some corn from a farmer and roasted it before the fire, while some nice slices of ham were frying, and the coffee pot was boiling, and so prepared a supper which they greatly enjoyed. The moon came up before they had finished the meal, and they felt strongly tempted to make another attempt at night work. "I'll tell you what we can do," exclaimed Harry. "Instead of rowing, let's tow the boat. One fellow can tow while another steers, and the rest can sleep in the boat." "All right," said Joe. "I'm willing to be a mule, only I'd like to know where my harness is coming from." "We've got rope enough for that," replied Harry. "I'll take the first turn, and tow for an hour, while Joe steers. Then I'll steer for an hour, while Joe tows. Then the other watch will take charge of the boat for 2 hours, and Joe and I will sleep." "If I'm to sleep on the bottom of that boat," said Joe, "I want some nice sharp stones to sleep on. I'm tired of sleeping on coffee pots and want a change." A long tow line was soon rigged on Harry's shoulders in such a way that it did not chafe him. A space in the bottom of the boat was cleared of coffee pots and other uncomfortable articles, and a pair of blankets was spread on the bottom board, so as to make a comfortable bed, which Tom and Jim hastened to occupy. Joe took the yoke lines in his hand and called to Harry to go ahead. When Harry first tugged at the tow line, the boat seemed very heavy, but as soon as she was in motion, Harry found that he could tow her as fast as he could walk, and without any difficulty. Had the locks been open and the canal boats been out of the way, the experiment of towing the White Wing at night would have been very successful. As it happened, the locks were kept closed during the night because the water was low, and the canal boats, not being able to pass the locks, were moored to the tow path. These boats gave Harry and Joe a great deal of trouble. When one of them was met, Harry had to unharness himself and toss the rope into the boat, and Joe had to get out an oar and scull around the obstacle. This happened so often that Tom and Jim got very little sleep, and long before it was time for them to resume duty, a lock was reached, and Harry had to call all hands to drag the boat around it. This was a hard piece of work. First, all the heavy things had to be taken out of the boat and carried around the lock. Then the boat had to be dragged out of the canal onto the tow path, hauled up a steep ascent, and launched above the upper gate. It took a good half-hour to pass the first of these closed locks, and when the boat was again ready to start, it was time to change the watch. Tom and Jim had managed to get only a few minutes' sleep, but Harry and Joe could not sleep a single wink. They had not turned in for more than 10 minutes when another lock was reached. This involved a second half-hour of hard work by all hands, and 20 minutes later 3 more locks close together blocked the way. It was foolish to persevere in dragging the boat around locks all night long, so, after getting her out of the canal on the side opposite to the tow path, the boys dragged her behind some bushes, where the canal boatmen could not see her at daylight. They then spread their rubber blankets on the ground and prepared to sleep through the remaining 4 or 5 hours of darkness. "Boys," said Joe, suddenly, "does it hurt a fat woman to jump on her?" "Don't know," answered Harry. "What do you ask for?" "Oh, nothing," said Joe. "Only when I was jumping from one canal boat to another, while I was a mule, I landed awfully heavy on a fat woman who was sleeping on deck." "What did she do?" asked Harry. "She didn't do anything. She just said, 'Go away with you now, Patrick,' as if she was half asleep and dreaming. Patrick must be in the habit of jumping on her." "Well, if she likes it, that's her business, not yours," suggested Harry. "Go to sleep, do!" "I am going to sleep, but I don't think we ought to spend our nights in getting run down by steamboats and jumping on strange fat women. I'm sure it isn't right. There, you needn't throw any more shoes at me. I won't say another word." End of Chapter 10, read by Nancy Cochran Gergen, Gilbert, Arizona, January 8, 2023.